So, in your situation, what boundaries did you put in place that were most helpful to you? And I'm sure that, and I guess to a bigger question, not only for you, but what do you even see with the partners that you work with?
Yeah, I think one of the first boundaries that I encourage partners to make is about themselves. What do you want to be different on the other side of this? Right. So, my first boundary for myself was that I was committed to my own care. I made a commitment to my own healing. So, anything that pushed up against that pushed up against me becoming better, those were the things where I was really firm. And that included going to my groups, going to my counseling
Mm-hmm.
sessions, making sure that I took time away, that I held my spouse accountable for the things that I needed to feel safe. And so sometimes people want to set the boundaries so much around the other person.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to do this and I need you to do that. But what really promotes healing is, what do you need as a person to heal yourself? What do you need to be safe? Because whether the relationship survives or not, you're going to be responsible for your own healing. And if all of your healing was contingent on another person's behavior, then you're left not only in that place of a victim, but you're left in that place of helplessness because you can't control
Mm-hmm.
another person. So my boundaries were around my own care, what I needed, asking for what I needed to feel safe. And what was really interesting was that one of the boundaries that I had set was that if my spouse did not stay committed to his recovery, then we would separate. So I wrote this boundary down, and I really encourage people to write your boundaries down, because here's what happened. 4 years later, when we got to the point where we separated, I was doubting myself. Did I try hard enough? Could I have
Mm-hmm.
done more? Was there something else for me to do? And I found this workbook where I had written these boundaries down. And I was like, wow, 4 years ago, I said to myself that if I don't see this change, I'm going to ask for separation. So it let me know my decision wasn't emotional, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't rash.
Right.
It was a boundary I had set for myself 3 years, 4 years before. And it just gave me such a confidence, again, to trust myself that what I needed was right and appropriate for that time.
It makes me think of our recovery action plan and writing it down because going through the ups and downs of living with an addict myself and having been divorced and remarried to another addict who's working on restoration and recovery, so that's a different story. But the ups and downs, the nice thing about having that recovery action plan is I could go to the part where I said, if these are the things I need in order to function as a healthy human being and mom, and and I can't be in a relationship with a liar, with a cheater, with these are the things I need. And so then when push comes to shove and there's another relapse or something like that, I get to remind myself and my spouse, we wrote these things down when we were in a healthier mindset. And now
Mm-hmm.
you're in your addiction mindset, I'm in my trauma. And so we shouldn't be making decisions out of this mindset. We had good, wise counsel when we made these plans. We both agreed to them when things were all up and happy. And so we need to follow them. And it's nice to have that to fall back on, instead of just like you said, making an emotional decision. And one example that I give to the women in my groups and that I needed to realize was because I would try to fix things like, oh, I just want things to go back to normal, so I'll just jump back into having sex because I just want things to be normal. And if he has sex, then he won't be mad. And I don't like this tension. And one, I had to start being okay if he was mad, right? Because I didn't do it. You did. So it's not my problem if you're mad. I mean, I don't want you to be mad. I want you to be working toward recovery. But I tweaked it by saying, if you don't, if you relapse, you don't get sex for 2 weeks, right? Instead of saying that, it was like, well, what do I need? When he relapses, I feel like this. This is how I feel. This is how I feel about marriage. This is the trauma I go into. And how much time do I need not having sex to try to heal from that? Or how much time will it take for me to build trust back up again? Because I don't want to have sex with somebody I don't trust. And that creates a whole slew of issues in and of itself. And so just it could be the same thing, but the way that I get to it is through, like what you said, what I need, not just putting these arbitrary, if you do this, then this happens. But it's coming out of
Right.
what I need to feel safe and what I need in our marriage.
Yeah, the language is so important. And we just recently finished an update to our Betrayal and Beyond curriculum, which is for betrayed partners. And it really was important, I think, in that process to help women understand that boundaries are for you. You know what I mean? My boundaries are for me so that I feel safe, so that I feel stable. But it does seem to be kind of this work in progress because initially, especially when you have women in group who are in crisis, they're more focused on he needs to do this and he needs to do this and he needs to do this, and really just kind of changing that mindset to say, what do you need? What do I need? What do I want in this relationship? What's going to help me to even feel safe, but also to focus on my health, and what does that look like? And so it seems to be kind of this ongoing training for a lot of women, but I feel like once they get it, they get it, and it even shows up in their language.
Well, we don't do a good job in our society of teaching people, but especially women, how to set boundaries. In fact, we teach women not to have boundaries, to care for everyone else, to
Mm-hmm.
be available, to be the nurturers, the
Be
caregivers,
submissive.
at the expense of self. And then this is especially true once you become a mom.
Mm-hmm.
Once and depending on where you go to church, if you get under some bad teaching, this whole abandoned self and you don't need to think about yourself and sacrifice. And, the Bible does talk about those things, but not in that way. Jesus never abandoned himself. He cared for himself. He took time away.
Mm-hmm.
There are many places in the Bible where it talks about him getting away, going to what it called like lonely places or isolated places to rejuvenate and recharge. And Jesus himself had boundaries.
Right.
So the idea that as Christian, especially as Christian women, we don't need boundaries is very contrary to what's in the Bible.
Yeah. And it's okay. So, dare I say, can I tread on these waters? I'm going to see how to word this carefully. One of the things with our new update is with the Betrayal and Beyond, we took on the ABSAT's teaching that they do, the multidimensional partner trauma model, and we went away from the codependent model, which all of this boundaries, I think it goes hand in hand with some of the teaching we had, that if in the older kind of codependent mindset, something you're doing or something you brought in from your family is really contributing to why your husband keeps relapsing or hurting you or having affairs or whatever it is. And we just really need to separate those issues, that we're not going to dive into family of origin or marriage issues when there's a trauma or an affair or a betrayal like this. We need to focus and give the women the tools they need to get through this betrayal trauma or this affair that they did not cause, and teach them how to respond in a way that's good for them. And that usually forces the addict to either change or leave, or the spouse leaves. And that's where this whole topic is coming from, of when you give somebody tools to be healthy and they say, I don't want to do this anymore, it's destroying my spirit, it's destroying my soul, I'm abusing my kids. I was really aggressive with my kids when they were little because I was so messed up from the marriages I was in that I just thought, oh, I'm just supposed to forgive, 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 forgive. And all this unprocessed trauma is just spewing out on my kids during the day. That is not a good situation. And so every once in a while, and I hope this doesn't happen with this episode, we'll get an angry spouse that's like, well, my spouse went through your material and then she left me. And I'm like, I have so many other questions. Did you change? Did you do work? Did you listen to what they needed? And so it is a shift, and it just comes with more education. But it is a shift that I think we have to make based off old teaching that sometimes was harmful, even though it was well intended.
I think that it's important to separate, and this is where the
Mm-hmm.
ABSAT's model comes in, is that the addiction, the adultery, the infidelity, the abuse has nothing to do with what's going on in the marriage.
Right.
If you are unhappy in your relationship or you're dissatisfied, you can go to counseling, you
Mm-hmm.
can join a support group, you can seek counsel from other people. You have lots of options besides going outside of the relationship. That is a violation of the covenant
Mm-hmm.
of the
Mhm.
relationship, to go outside of the relationship and to say, to make another person responsible for that choice is really unhealthy. So
Yes.
you could, I say that betrayal is like let's say you have your marriage here as a unit, and that marriage unit may be very damaged. It might be have fractures and cracks and things that you're working on. But betrayal is like a boulder that comes in and literally crushes the unit. So you cannot deal with whatever is happening in the unit until you deal with the boulder that's on top. It's
That's
like,
good.
I've got to
Mhm.
remove this big piece that is literally crushing the marriage first. And that boulder is not the responsibility of the person that's crushed. The person who went outside the marriage brought that in. And so if you don't deal with that and you start talking about family of origin issues, in some ways you are blaming the person, the partner, for another person's choices, which actually um, continues that model of codependency,
Mm-hmm.
which makes you
Mhm.
responsible for another person. So it's like, even though people are saying, well, that's codependent behavior, you're reinforcing that idea of codependency by making the partner responsible for the betrayer's choices.
Right. Yeah, I'm so glad we touched on that because life is so, so stressful, and that's where when you are using sex or porn to cope and you want to blame it on your partner, oh, you just had a baby, or oh, you haven't been available because your brother died last year and you're emotional. That is so wrong. And it just shows that there's a lack of being able to, not that John did that, you guys, even though I use kind of my real examples. I don't have a baby hidden somewhere. But even though those are very, very stressful things, and maybe they do take away from the sexual intimacy of a marriage, it just highlights that there's an inability to cope with life on the addict's part because these are normal. They're sad and they're heavy, but they're things that are going to continue to come your way. You are going to experience loss. You are going to experience death. You're never just going to get through a phase and then be like, okay, as long as nothing else happens. So it just comes down to the addict needs to get to the core of why they cope in those ways and how to cope with stressful things in a healthy way that honors the marriage. And the partner needs to heal. And then after that, if there's still cyclical marriage issues about money and, then let's get to the core of why we think that way. But it's so important to just let the healing from the betrayal trauma be what it is and hopefully both partners get help so that a divorce doesn't have to happen.